Welcome to this short color lecture that you can use as a guide when you do your next assignment, the blurry photo assignment. First of all, color is the most difficult to teach of all the aspects of painting. There's countless books and theories on color and its use, and many do more to confuse its use than to clarify it really. Sometimes they kind of take the intuition out of it, and it really should be an intuitive thing that you get better at as you develop a skill for applying it. This is just to kind of give you some basics, kind of as a user's manual. So in Paint, we're trying to duplicate the effects of light, and many things can come into play when we're doing that. The light temperature can change, the atmosphere can change the effect of sunlight. For example, at noon on a clear day, the sun appears yellow-white. But as the sun sets in the evening, its light must travel farther through the atmosphere before it gets to you, basically. So colors with shorter wavelengths, such as blue, green, and violet, are scattered, but red, having the longest wavelength, remains. So this creates the red glow that we see at the sunset. Much of the difficulty with color comes in the options that you have. You perceive thousands of colors in nature, and although painters don't paint with that many colors, there's still hundreds of colors available at the art store. So simplifying is the key, and there are a few concepts that can make color less confusing. The basic goals are to be able to match the color you want, and in order to do this, you need to be able to saturate it, make it bright and full of color. You might call it color strength. And on the other side of the coin, to be able to neutralize it or reduce it or dull it. So when you want to dull the color, and many of you might already know this depending on your foundations classes, but when you want to dull the color, one thing to keep in mind is complementary colors. You can also call these color opposites, colors that are opposite one another on the color chart. So if you see a color that is neutral in the situation, in the environment that you want to paint, say if you're painting a still life, if you see a gray and it's kind of indeterminate, a good place to start is by mixing two complementary colors together. So you could mix a yellow and a purple together, or a blue and an orange, or a green and a red, and a little bit of white if you want a gray. If you mix two complementary colors together, these are again the colors that are opposites on the color chart, and it's kind of shown with that line that's turning there. If you mix two of those colors together and no white in with it, then you'll get this kind of ugly brown, and you can see here in the chart, in the color charts over here to the left hand side, these are the kinds of browns that you'll get. But when you start to add white to it, you'll get these lovely neutral grays. So that's really the kind of neutral color that you get when people talk about mixing complementaries together. You do have to add a little bit of white to them to achieve a neutral gray, if that makes sense. So without the white, you get this ugly brown. With a little bit of white, you get these nice pearlescent grays. So if you see a light gray in nature, mix white with your complement to lighten. If it's dark, grab two dark complementary tubes of color and mix them together. Um, you may notice also at times that when you're trying to mix two colors together, they might become muddy when you're wanting to keep them pure. In paint form, the primary colors are red, yellow, and blue. And now, in theory, you should be able to mix any color you need for your primaries from your primaries. This is what people often say, and you've probably heard this, except it isn't true. Each paint tube color leans slightly to the warm side or the cool side of its color family. So, not to be confusing, but a yellow can be a warm yellow having some red in it, or a cool yellow with some blues in it. So, when I say warm, I mean red tones. When I say cool, I mean blue tones. So each tube of color basically will have a little bit of warm color or cool color in it. So this matters later on as you begin to mix your colors with one another. So over here in these diagrams, you can see these are different strategies for mixing greens. So one is with an ultramarine blue and a cadmium yellow light. And the second example where I get a brighter green, I'm mixing different colors that simply work out to get that green a little better. So when I mix ultramarine blue with cadmium yellow light, the result is a less vibrant green than if I mixed ultramarine blue with cadmium lemon. Um, the reason is that both ultramarine blue and the cadmium yellow light have a touch of red in them. And since its red is the complement to green, it grays or neutralizes the green. So basically, those secondary colors that have complementary colors in them, they work together to neutralize the green. So that green will be a little duller than what I would want. Over here, a more vibrant option is when you mix a phthalo blue and a cadmium yellow lemon, you get a very vibrant green because of the absence of red in both colors. So this green is not quite as bright when mixed with the cadmium yellow light, which also contains a slight touch of red. This isn't stuff that I expect you to know or to know the colors and which colors to mix together at this point to maintain color purity. It's just a thing to have in the back of your head in case you're getting frustrated about mixing some of these colors together, and especially greens are difficult. So if you're trying to mix greens and they're getting a little dull, let me know and I can help you figure out other options of mixtures so that you can maintain the color. This happens especially when you begin to mix with white, as we can talk about a little bit later on. So to recap, each tube leans toward either warm or cool. This makes a difference when you're trying to create bright, pure colors. It takes time to learn which is which because the tubes just have the color names on the outside of them. They won't tell you which is warm and which is cool. So again, feel free to ask me which colors might create pure color mixtures, especially if you're unfamiliar with them. But in this picture here, these are generally the brightest colors that you can switch in when you feel that the color you're mixing just creates mud. And again, this is especially common when you're mixing with white. Those midtones just don't end up as bright and chromatic as you want them to be sometimes when you're mixing certain colors. So again, if you feel you're struggling with this, let me know and we'll switch it out for colors that can work a little bit better. I can give you some tips on this and show you some color charts that'll help simplify the process. The last thing I want to cover is a myth about black paints. Have you all been told not to paint with black? Many of you probably have. Different teachers will say different things. But kind of a rule of thumb in art school generally is don't paint with black. And there's a couple of good articles about this that dispel these myths about not painting with black. So two master painters, John Singer Sargent and Claude Monet, who are shown here in this slide, they used to go painting outdoors together. And there's this mythological story about how Sargent was said to have forgotten his black paint, and he asked Monet to lend him some. Monet said that he doesn't allow himself to use black, and he claims that Impressionists make all their colors by mixing, so by mixing chromatically. And Sargent, on the other hand, was unable to understand how anyone could paint without black paint. And we'll get into this much more later, but for now, it's best to know that there are no hard and fast rules. There are painters who use black, and there are painters who don't. They mix their blacks chromatically with tubes of color. Probably a reason for this myth that perpetuates in art school is because your professors are trying to get you used to mixing your colors instead of just reaching for the tube of black every time. If you mix your blacks and if you mix color complements and neutrals from your tubes of color, they'll be more interesting than if you're always grabbing a tube of black paint. This can create kind of a flat color effect for your composition. So it's best to try to mix them. Some artists even limit their palette to derive their colors only using black. So for instance, this painting by Paul Emslie used only Mars Violet, blue, black, and white to achieve his BP portrait winning painting that he called Michael Simpson. BP Portrait Prize is one of the most important prizes for portraiture in the world, and it's held at the National Gallery in Great Britain. And I believe the winner, if this is up to date, if my knowledge of it is up to date, wins about $30,000 for first place. So he won this portrait award back in 2007, and he only used these two colors plus white, one of the colors being black. So it's pretty mind blowing, but color can do dazzling things when you know how to mix it the right way. So this is my suggestion for you when you're mixing your blacks. So instead of reaching for that tube of black paint, these are some options for you. So there's 1, 2, 3 options. Any of these will get you a nice, rich black paint. And you can warm it or cool it depending on the amount of each color that you add to it. You could add a little bit more red or brown or blue, and you can vary your black paint up, which is always, like I said, more interesting than if you're grabbing that tube of ivory black and like dulling every single color with it. So option 1 is transparent oxide red plus a little alizarin crimson and ultramarine blue. In that mixture, I predominantly have to use blue, I have to say. It seems like the other colors overpower the blue pretty easily, and so I'm always having to add a little more blue than the other colors in order to get a black in that mixture. So try that out if you have those colors. If not, kind of a more standard black mixture is ultramarine blue and burnt umber together. That's option 2 there. So what I found though is I can get a darker, richer black paint with option 3 if I actually mix a darker blue, Prussian blue, plus burnt umber. This is a mix that I really prefer because again, you can get a little darker than you can with option 2 with the ultramarine blue. And I know you can't tell from looking at this chart because it's a little bit, it, it isn't quite accurate when you look at these tube colors unless you're looking at the actual paint instead of the cover of the tube. But Prussian blue is a little darker than ultramarine blue. So again, you can get a darker mixture of black if you try that option. Try these things out and see what works for you. Again, there's no right or wrong way. It's just different artists do different things. So these are all fun things to try. All right, thanks.